First of all, I'm going to give a bit of a reprise of a talk that I gave last week at the Crazy Ambitious Symposium, which was more about diversity and inclusivity. But what I'm also going to do is introduce people to the Kindness in Science initiative, if you like, and that's certainly not come directly from me. There are others close to all of us who have been involved. In the last sort of 8 months or so, we realised that actually we needed to walk the talk on partnership and what that means. And so we have put it out there that she is the director Māori, or effectively a co-director of the challenge, and we run it together. We partition up our tasks, and so that we're not constantly figuring out and doing the same things all the time, but we really decided to walk the talk on partnership. And why I put a photo up of Melanie is that she has given me a lot of inspiration over the years around how to, I guess, put into practice some of the things that I'm going to talk about today. So I'm really going to talk about a mixture of institutional and individual things that we can do. But certainly in the last few years, Mel and I have spent a lot of time thinking about institutional and structural changes and system change, and how we can sort of make the system a bit more inclusive and diverse in science. And so there are things like, for example, Te Tere Whakamātaki, the Māori Biosecurity Network, that have grown out of initiatives like what we've put in place in the Science Challenge. And so I think that's probably why we were such keen supporters of the Kindness in Science initiative, is because we really felt like we were starting to walk the talk. None of us is perfect. We all have things that we're confronting or dealing with on a daily basis that make it difficult. And I'm not going to talk for very long, by the way, and so I'm really hoping that we could open that up to discussion as well. So thank you to those who supported the technology. So underneath the blue square, it says the 15th of March 2019. So this is the part of the talk that I gave last week. And so when we had the Crazy Ambitious Symposium, we planned it for many months in advance. It's a symposium that we ran to highlight and showcase the work that we've been doing in the National Science Challenge. I wasn't actually going to use it as a platform for myself. There are lots of early career researchers and lots of Māori researchers and many others who needed the space and the place to present their work and talk about themselves, and I didn't want a piece of that. I felt like I was in a privileged enough position. But then the 15th of March events happened, and I realised that I needed to say something. And the reason that I felt I needed to say something is that New Zealand unquestionably showed great leadership on the world stage, right? And so there is a kindness there at heart, but there were a couple of things that our Prime Minister said on the day, actually, that didn't sit well with me. So one of those was, "This is not who we are," and many of us remember that. And then the other thing she said was, "This is New Zealand's darkest day." And a piece of me thought, that's actually not right. This is who we are, and we probably do need to front up as a nation. And there were lots of really eloquent blogs and opinion pieces over the subsequent days that kind of explored that a little bit more. And I collected those because that was my way of coping with what happened in the first place. And I just read a lot and processed a lot. And I thought about it a bit more, and I thought, well, I'll never be a politician, but what I can do is change something in my own backyard, which is in the science community. And so that's why I decided to speak out. So from there, really what I did was just put out 5 things, just kind of my reckons on what we could do differently in science. One of the reasons I did that is because last year in the National Science Challenges, we all went through a process of refreshing our strategies and coming up with what we would do from 2019 to 2024. And we put out a set of values that underpin everything that we do. And so really to live by these values is a lot of it is about kindness in science. So I'm not going to go through them all there, but effectively the first two are really about being passionate about what we do and really wanting to make a difference for Aotearoa. Some of the other ones there, I'm sure in the middle, you know, they're words that you recognise. It's really about that intergenerational thinking, about recognising different knowledge bases, about giving others the voice and empowering others. That's the tino rangatiratanga bit. And then the last two there are really about being excellent, trying to do well, do better, and also about working in partnership. And that's partly why Mel and I have put it out there that we're working in partnership, and we're trying to embed that throughout all levels of the National Science Challenge now. So it's really just to start to make that difference in our own backyard and to live by our own values. And as I said before, we all fall down sometimes, but that's the intention. So then I just thought about 5 things. I could have thought of 10 or 20 different things about what we could do in science to make a difference, but I only had about 5 minutes that day, so I just put out 5 things. One of the things that I think we can really do differently is to take the time to listen to the diverse voices that we have in our science community and beyond our science community if we want to engage better. And so there's a couple of projects in the Science Challenge that really highlight that for me. One is called Kauri Rescue, which is obviously focused in Auckland and Northland. It's about empowering citizens to take action to protect kauri trees literally in their own backyards. So it's very much a community citizen science initiative. It's led by the community. And it's been a real success story. It's now scaled up and escalated. It's not any longer, won't be shortly any longer funded by the National Science Challenge, but Auckland Council have agreed to take that over and help keep scaling it up. So it's got a real sustainable initiative behind it. And that's because the scientists step back and let the community take control, I suppose, and drive it forward. And we all know that there are numerous examples of that in science, but it's not always easy to do that, especially in the constrained and competitive funding environment that we have. So, and then the other example I have is a woman named Monica Girth at Victoria University has been working quite closely with one of our kaumātua, Kevin Prime, to understand the spread of kauri dieback through soil. So that pathogen actually has these things called zoospores, which swim through the soil. They swim quite quickly. They can cover 1 metre in a day, which is quite rapid. And what we don't understand is what attracts or repels the zoospore. So how does it sniff out the kauri roots and infect them? And that's a big part of Monica's work. But when she started, there were dozens of different molecular compounds that she could try as either attractants or repellents of the pathogen in the soil. And what she did was she teamed up with Matua Kevin Prime to get some ideas around what she should try first. And so based on his mātauranga, his knowledge and his recommendations, she slimmed it down to a short list of a number of plant species that she should try to get extracts from, to then trial whether they attract or repel the pathogen. And she's actually discovered, or they have actually discovered both. So they've got compounds now based on his knowledge from plants that both attract and repel the pathogen. And that's really important if we're seeking a solution to preventing spread. So that's just a couple of examples where diverse voices and knowledge systems, I guess, can be brought to bear on science in a different way. I know that all of you will have very similar examples or stories. I think the other thing that it's important to recognise is that we need to be more equitable in the way we distribute resources. And this comes a little bit to the structural, I guess, our institutional structures that we have in place in science. The more that I work in the Science Challenge, the more I realise that actually despite having a vision, mātauranga policy, And despite, all of the work that we're doing to try and be more inclusive, we've still got a really long way to go to actually recognise other knowledge holders and resource them properly and be a part of our teams rather than sort of a small part with minimal resources. And that's something, again, that we did in the challenge. We decided to empower these 3 kaumātua to take the lead on a big science project around how we sort of store and translate intergenerational knowledge that is often very local to particular places, but there are also some generic principles that can be applied to understanding and storing that knowledge long term, and that probably are more national in scope. And so these 3 kaumātua have been exploring that alongside Jamie Ataria, who's here in the picture, one of the researchers on the program. Jamie himself said that he really struggled to let go here. They would go to numerous meetings where he would say, we don't know what's happening, we don't know what we're going to get out of this project, but the whole team stuck with it and properly resourced the kaumātua to do this work and lead this work. And that's been very important for us to not only embed our own values, but also will be huge in Māoridom in the long term in this project. And I really can't state that enough, but it's because we would try to be equitable about the resourcing behind it and about the recognition of that the knowledge holders were the primary research leads here. And then the third thing that I said last week that probably generated the most discussion on social media was this. So I guess changing tack is that I personally find it quite difficult when I see language that combats sexism and racism that is in itself, in my opinion, bordering on sexist and racist. And so what Susie Weil said in this article, she wrote this article about a year ago actually. For those of you that don't know who Susie is, she is a scientist at the University of Auckland, and she is also a columnist in the Herald, but this article was actually in the spin-off. And this is what she said in this article. And whilst I think it's a really important point to make to celebrate diversity in science, and I admit to being pretty excited when I knew that our new Prime Minister's Chief Science Advisor was a woman. That's great, it's great to have more diversity in science, but I don't think it's the right thing to do to tackle tackle the problem of individual and institutional racism and sexism by using this kind of language. So for me, I've tried to pull myself up on that now. I've used that kind of language in the past myself, but then also I need to recognise that there are a lot of older white men who have given me lots and lots of opportunities over the years and been very empowering. And so I think there are kinder ways to do things. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't address the barriers and the issues that we all confront in science, but my personal opinion, and it is just a personal opinion, is that we could do things differently. The fourth thing that I suggested is that there's a growing recognition that connecting people with place is really important for a better environmental impact and a lower environmental footprint. And this was highlighted about 3 weeks ago when the IPBES report came out on the global report on the environment, state of biodiversity in particular. And the full report is actually not out yet, but the summary clearly states that there are examples and case studies in there where Indigenous people and or local communities taking control and managing the environment has better biodiversity outcomes. And we've seen that in the National Science Challenge as well. It's been quite an important piece of the social and other research that we've been doing in the challenge, and it's been quite an interesting journey. I think there's a lot of research that could be done in this space, and interestingly, I was talking with Silawehi about this finding, or this observation, I guess, just last week, and we said, gosh, there is a lot of research to be done in there. You know, what are the reasons why Indigenous people are better stewards of our land and our biodiversity? And she said there has to be a kind way to investigate and ask that question. And so we don't know what that is yet, but it was a really insightful comment, I thought, about the kind of things we could do. So not confronting the hard stuff, but the opposite, actually looking at some really important and interesting findings and exploring them, but in a safe space. And then the final suggestion that I had for how we get to be a bit more inclusive and diverse and practice kindness is around investigating our history. So New Zealand actually has a very interesting history relative to many other countries in the rest of the world, where Indigenous peoples are probably treated a bit differently. Now, we have a very long way to go, so don't get me wrong, but we do have a treaty, and that has actually made quite a big difference. But it still surprises me every day how few people actually know or understand the importance and significance of this and what that Crown Māori partnership actually means in practice. I would be the first to admit that I've got a long way to go. We're all on a journey. But it is really important to go to a treaty workshop or learn a bit of te reo or take the time to understand what happened in our history. And that's why, again, the phrase, "this is our darkest day," didn't sit very well with me personally, because actually you don't have to look very far back in New Zealand's history to know that in terms of acts of terrorism, it probably was one of our darkest days, but not the only one. So it's really just a way of like learning from the past in order to move forward. And I have really tangible examples of how we can do that in science. And I think we probably all do. So people often ask me the question, why bother? You'd be surprised who asks that question. I guess for me, and the thing that is observed not just in New Zealand but worldwide, is that we do get better outcomes when we include more diverse voices and faces. And so embracing that, and the inclusivity and diversity is really important, because we're going to generate greater impact. And in our case, for Manaaki Whenua and for the National Science Challenge, it's really around the environment. And the kindness and science movement, to my mind, is a really big part of that. So that's really it from me. I'm quite happy to sort of like facilitate discussion and questions. Those were just my reckons, I suppose. And there's loads of information and resources on the Kindness and Science website. That's a little bit nascent by Tammy's own admission, but she's really keen to sort of build it and include more things in there. So there's a lot of ideas about how kindness and science can be embedded both at an individual level and at a structural or institutional level. And it's really that collective will to make a change, I think, at a structural level that I'm personally very interested in now. There's a hashtag, Kindness and Science. They're particularly active on Twitter rather than on Facebook that I know of, but I probably wouldn't know anyway. Kia ora, thank you.